We've now hit 100 days until the US midterm elections. As the day gets closer, topics like abortion, inflation and gun violence continue to present divisions within the country. Debates that are sure to make an impact on the campaign trail. Joining us live now to talk about what we can expect in the months to come, I'm joined by Joseph Williams, former senior editor of US News. Joseph, thank you for your time. Now, Democrats in 2022 find themselves confronted with a similar problem to Republicans in 2018, don't they? Remind us of the roadblocks that Biden is facing in this election.
Well, first and foremost is Biden himself. His approval ratings are deep underwater, 38, 39%, depending on what poll you look at. Headwinds from inflation, headwinds from the war in Ukraine, which seems to be going to be a long, slow slog, along with redistricting rules that have changed the game changed the political map actually for Democrats in several key swing states, along with the fact that the party out of power tends to gain seats in an off-year election, and this is exactly that scenario that the Democrats find themselves.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of the main points there. There have been some big developments over the past few months: the overturning of Roe v. Wade, a wave of high-profile mass shootings, the investigation into January 6th Capitol riot, but also inflation remains to be at the height of everyone's minds, the cost of living. Do you think that people mostly vote from ideology, or do they vote from their hip pockets?
Well, it depends. In off-year elections, ideology tends to rule the day, and the party out of power generally is more motivated because they're more upset, they're more frustrated, they're more irritated by the situation in which they find themselves, which is the broad minority. However, in this particular set of circumstances, those unpopular things that you mentioned that tick to the Republican side of the ledger, that is the Roe versus Wade ruling, the inability to control gun violence in the United States, those could be very powerful factors that could be the countervailing weight against inflation that's riding against Democrats in this particular upcoming election. However, how strong that happens remains to be seen, mainly because inflation is something that's felt by everyone. Everybody has to go to the grocery store, nearly everyone has to fill a tank of gasoline, and it's become an untenable situation because prices are rising faster than wages are rising to meet them.
Now, you mentioned gerrymandering. This is quite a specific concept to the US in terms of elections. State legislatures and independent commissions have begun the process of drawing new state, House and Senate congressional districts. Can you explain for an international audience how this works and how redistricting impacts elections in general?
Right. Well, in the United States, it's a representative democracy. That is, the number of representatives sent to the main body of legislature depends on the population in which the state sends that person to Congress. So in other words, if you have somebody who's representing a particular distance, my district, for example, is Silver Spring, the number of representatives we get is based upon the population of our particular district. So in the state of Maryland, I think we get somewhere around 12 or 14 representatives to go to Congress because we're a fairly populous state with major cities of Baltimore and Washington. However, states further out west where the population is sparser, they get fewer representatives. However, in states that are populous, the representation is dictated by the party in power. That is, they get to decide the maps for which I get to vote, for which you get to vote, for which other people who live in this particular area get to vote. And if they decide the maps on a majority population that leans Democratic or Republican, it can swing the outcome of that particular election, which in turn has a kind of a chain reaction, which dictates the number of seats that the party in power or out of power gets in Congress, and that can flip the House of Representatives. In the United States, it looks like we're going to, along with historical trends, the Republicans in several key states, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, for example, they've drawn maps that favor their party. So the party out of power, the Democrats in those states that I mentioned where you have Republican strongholds, they've drawn the maps to be favorable for Republicans, which gives them an edge, which makes the advantage, along with all the other things, even more powerful in this upcoming election.
Could perhaps even bring a result before we get to the polls, in fact. Now, Trump is way more involved in these races than just about anyone else. Talk about how his campaign to endorse candidates might impact the election, and likewise, the endorsements Biden has made for Democratic candidates.
Well, it's very much an unequal balance because Trump's fans are very intent. They tend to vote very strongly depending on what he recommends. So far, his record is a little mixed, but he still holds a lot of sway and power with his party, way more than Joe Biden does. Joe Biden can recommend certain candidates, but there's internal battles in the Democratic Party. That's nothing compared to the influence of Trump. He has some challengers, however, and some of the people that he's recommended who get elected, who have won in primaries, tend to be on the extreme of the Republican Party. And it's an open question whether or not those candidates that Donald Trump has endorsed can actually win in a broader election where more of the Republicans are voting. You'll have independents, you'll have Democrats, you'll have people who may not be quite under the sway of Donald Trump voting for the candidates that he's endorsed. So that could be a drawback, an asset or liability. It remains to be seen in the general election. But those people are in the know, or those people who are in the know, tend to believe that the more extreme the candidate, the less likely they are to win in a general election.
Really interesting to get your insight, Joseph. Thank you very much for your time. Joseph Williams there, for a senior editor of US News.